Joining me live now is the head of research at the Climate Council, Simon Bradshaw, who has attended the Climate Change Conference 5 times now. Simon, good morning to you. First of all, India committing to net zero by 2070. Let's get your reaction to that.
Look, every country is going to have to do more. Of course, we can't compare India to Australia. They're different countries, very different stages of development. It's always been clear under the Paris Agreement that the advanced economies have to move faster, have to move earlier and make deeper cuts. So I think we shouldn't read too much into that. And of course, India, all countries are going to have to step it up further. But the fact that they have made that net zero commitment for the first time, and so a calling time on fossil fuels effectively, that is significant. But certainly we'll have to see further increase in that commitment as we're going to have to see from all countries.
This is going to fuel arguments from critics, though, isn't it? That, well, hang on, they're taking up until 2070. Why do we have to go so hard so fast?
Look, there's two things we've got to recognise there. First of all, if we move faster over this decade, and it's really action this decade to 2030 that matters, not a more distant net zero date. If we do that, we're actually starting to unlock a lot more economic opportunity for Australia, because we're quite unique here. We're very, very vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and we've, of course, seen the damage through the Black Summer, through the damage to the Great Barrier Reef, but we're quite uniquely poised to take advantage of the global energy transition in terms of new jobs, in terms of new prosperity, especially in some of those regions that are going to have to move out of their more traditional industries. So there's an argument for moving faster because it's in our economic interests, just as it's imperative, of course, to tackling global climate change. So we shouldn't be comparing Australia and India, different countries, different responsibilities, but also fundamentally, Glasgow is about accelerating action through the 2020s, and that's what we're going to be judged on. That's where Australia is sorely lacking because we've shown up without any new commitment to accelerate action this decade.
At what point is this conference at, though? Because already you've had the communique with seriously watered down language coming out of the G20 that aims to achieve certain targets by the middle of the century, not specifically 2050. Some critics have said that's a move to placate the likes of Russia and India, for that matter. So where are we at now when it comes to the success or failure of COP26? I mean, some people have already written it off.
They shouldn't have written it off because there is a long way to go. There's a lot still in play. I think we have to look at it in context as well. We've seen a lot of momentum over the last year. I mean, if you were to tell me a year ago, we'd be going into COP26 with the whole group of 7 big developed countries having committed to halving emissions this decade, with all those big economies of Asia having committed to net zero emissions by around mid-century, that's a big shift in over a year. Now, is it enough? It's not enough. But there is momentum there. And the key to success in Glasgow is going to be that through announcements, we see the yawning emissions gap closed as far as possible, but also that countries come out of these 2 weeks with a real commitment to further ratcheting up action through the 2020s. So it's a shame the G20 didn't get further collectively. And we've got to be honest, Australia was one of the countries dragging its feet there, that was wanting to water down the commitment on coal phase outs, reducing methane emissions.
But on that point, though, only 12 of the G20 nations have committed to it, right? It's not just us.
Say again, sorry?
But of the G20 nations, only 12 have committed to net zero emissions, right? So it's not just us.
But all those advanced economies, the G7, that's a group of the biggest developed countries, are all en masse committed to halving emissions this decade. And that's what we should be measuring ourselves against. And in fact, at the moment, we've come into this COP still the worst performing among comparable nations, because we've had the US step up in a big way, the Europeans, the UK, New Zealand has just increased its 2030 target. So we're actually sticking out like a sore thumb in still clinging to a 2030 target we set back in Paris that was considered very weak at the time, and we've now fallen even further behind to the rest of the world. So we need to be showing up here with a much stronger commitment for 2030, and that's how we encourage other countries to do more too.
Okay, Simon, appreciate that. Thank you. We'll talk to you soon.